I am Josh Solomon. I am an environmental project manager, environmental scientist with ChemTrack Alaska, based in Anchorage. My colleague Melissa here. Um, so I've been working for ChemTrack for the last year or so. Prior to that, I was just telling Tav I was a high school earth science teacher. So I have been kind of pushed into the role of the presentation guy these days, which I enjoy. It's a good throwback to my time in the classroom. So it's good to be here with you all to talk about our brownfield site inventory that we're going to be doing. Um, I think we'll be in person in a couple weeks to be able to hopefully meet some of you all there and chat a bit more about this. But let's get rolling with our presentation today. So, purpose of today's meeting. What are we doing here? We are looking for your all's input to help develop a list of sites of possible environmental concern in your community. That's what this brownfield site inventory is. This information will be used by local leaders in the state to prioritize cleanup efforts and secure government funding. Over the next 20 minutes, probably 15 to 20 minutes, we'll walk through these different items here. So who was involved in this effort? What is a brownfield site inventory? And as part of that, what is brownfield program? What is a brownfield site? What does that even mean? How does the process work? And what could the sites look like? And where are these sites in your community? So that would be an opportunity for you all to kind of share out on some of your long standing community knowledge where you might know of possible contaminated sites. So who is involved in this effort? We have the city of Dillingham, city of Aleknagik, Bristol Bay Native Association, the ADEC. I saw Navi there, our ADEC project manager. Thanks for coming. The US EPA, it's our funding source and National Brownfields Manager, and then us, ChemTrack, we are the environmental contractors. We've been brought on on a technical assistance grant to kind of help organize this process in conjunction with you all. So thanks for coming. Who are we? This is our safety vests that we now wear, and really excited that we have our values on here. Like I mentioned, I've only been here for a year. But ChemTrack based in Anchorage here, do no harm, respect others, make things better. Maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid, but I actually do feel like we're doing these things pretty well. And it's been a cool last year being a part of it. So excited to try and kind of expand this kind of more educational and community-based arm of the company as we work with you all.
Josh,
We are.
you might not be able to see it, but there's a hand raised. Do you want to hold off on questions till the end?
Just a,
No, I think it's okay. We're a small enough group. Fritz, you have
just
a
a just a quick one, if I could. Could you define what constitutes a brownfield site? I think we know instinctively, but that would make for a good definition. A good.
totally. In approximately 2 slides, I have that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking, though. That's a pretty reasonable question to have in a brownfield site inventory presentation. Um, so there's a nice photo of our team there. Got an OSHA safety award this fall we were really excited about. Dogs in the office, it's been a cool thing. Some of the projects we've been working on across Alaska in the brownfields realm. So we're actually also doing a Bethel, Akiak, and Akiachak site inventory. We've done a lot of work kind of later on in the brownfields process, doing the site assessments and cleanup remediation. Taslina and Copper River Native Association, and out in Tetlin. It's been a cool few projects to work on. So now to answer Fritz's question here as we get going, like what is the Brownfields program? What is its goal or the purposes of the program? So the goal of the program is to provide technical and financial support for communities to assess, clean up, and plan reuse of known or potentially contaminated sites. So what is that actual definition? Here is the official EPA definition. A brownfield is a property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. So basically, a place that is underutilized or abandoned as a result of this potential contamination or is unable to be developed further potentially due to this potential contamination. And I keep saying potential. Note here at the bottom, the site doesn't have to be proven to be contaminated, just even the perception of, which might limit development opportunities or kind of motivation to get the process of redevelopment going, can be enough to qualify as a brownfield site. And so, right, that's the definition. What does this actual process and program look like? And that's where I introduced to you this really awesome brownfield site process timeline. I got to do a similar presentation last week out in Tasmania, and we were talking about this process. My colleague that I've worked with out in the Copper River Native Association put this together, Sarah Daskowitz. I will give her all the credit in the world. I thought this was a really good slide and wanted to incorporate it to kind of use here today. So you'll see step one, year one of this long process, it all begins with the identifying and inventorying of these potential sites. So we're here to do this identify and inventory. Once you have that inventory, then you start the process of actually figuring out, okay, we think there could be potential contamination here. Now we're going to do a phase one environmental site assessment and figure out, is there actually a reason to believe that there is contamination? So we do that phase one to look for the recognized environmental concerns. Once you've identified that there are some of those, you move on to the phase two, which is then kind of trying to quantify or get a better sense of the amount and type of contamination that's present. So as you can see, we're already kind of into year 3 or 4. This is a long process, but we kind of have to go through each of these steps to eventually get to the cleanup and revitalization. So once you've identified where and how much and what type of contaminant you have, you can move into the cleanup and finally the revitalization. And that's a big part of the brownfield program is getting to that revitalization step. Any questions at this point? Any concerns? Okay. All right. So, like I said, we're specifically here doing this inventory. We'll zoom in a little bit at what is involved in that. So, how does the brownfield inventory process work? We're here today. We're hosting community meetings. So, we've got this virtual meeting here. As I mentioned, we're going to be in person in a couple of weeks from April 20th to 22nd between Dillingham and Aleknagik. Having the opportunity to also meet in person. We'll do a similar one of these with, I think Tav said, we can get some lunch brought in for the lunch and learns. And that should be a really good opportunity to meet face to face. As a part of that, we'll also be visiting potential sites. So sites that we might identify in today's meeting, or some that I've already been able to get that I'll mention here later in the presentation. We'll also be interviewing community members during that trip next in a couple weeks, and we'll be reviewing records through the ADC databases. That's the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. We look at even well logs, historical aerial photographs, land use records, community plans, basically things that can give us an insight into how the land was used in the past, to get a better sense of any potential sources of contamination that may have occurred. So that's kind of this inventory process we're doing. Now moving on to the actual sites. So what kind of sites fall under this definition? It's a pretty broad definition, just right, something that has been abandoned or underutilized, or just could be contaminated, potential contamination that can look like a lot of different things. So this is a picture here. I don't know, is anybody in any of those rooms familiar with this picture? Where this was, I see a hand up somewhere in there. Yeah.
That's not Manicodic, is it?
That's the Bingman's property in Dillingham.
Oh, I see it now.
There you go.
Before they did solid waste removal, yeah.
Yeah, I found this picture in an old article, I think. Is that Cassandra that was talking? Is that Emma?
Yeah,
Cassandra.
Cassandra? Yeah, you had mentioned in our phone call the Bingman property. I found this picture. And so this is before it was cleaned up, correct? Or at least the solid waste removed?
Correct.
my
And
understanding is
before the
now it's like
fire.
a clear lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I thought this was, with that in mind, I felt like that was a really good example of a potential brownfield site, right? So you've got this big old dump site, accumulated cars. There's a very similar one I was telling Tav. I used to spend time down in Seward. They had the same sort of situation down there, this old property where a bunch of things had accumulated that could potentially lead to contamination. So we're looking at former shops, vehicle storage areas, old gas stations or fuel storage sites. A lot of the ones that I've been working on out in Taslina have been just places where they had old fuel storage tanks like USTs, where leaking can occur, or potentially, as in the third one here, unreported fuel chemical spills. The informal dump sites or landfills is a big one, as we all know in rural Alaska. I just last week chatting with somebody out in Taslina, and we were talking about these different sites and potential places, and it was an older tribal elder that had been there for a long time. She was like, I know we used to just throw our trash and waste right over that guardrail out there, right along the side of the highway. And was like, oh, really? Nobody's thought to investigate that again. It's been, maybe 30 or 40 years since the last time it was used, but it obviously still can be sitting there now covered in vegetation, alders or whatnot. And all of a sudden you've got this uh, unknown site of contamination. So those informal dump sites and your all's local knowledge of those past sites is very helpful. Canneries and waterfront industrial sites, big one in that region. I spent some time. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Graveyard Point, kind of across Bristol Bay from you there. As an old the Wards Cove packaging site, there was a big contaminated site. The former military installations in Alaska, obviously, are a big one. Abandoned mining sites and abandoned homesteads. So these are right, kind of big picture some of the things we're looking at as potential brownfield sites. Now, zooming in, like what can that actually look like? These dump sites, you got steel drums, oftentimes are used to hold different kinds of chemicals or often petroleum products, things that can lead to contamination if they're spilled. As I mentioned, those deteriorating above ground or below ground fuel storage tanks, an oily sheen on the surface water, hazardous material or household cleaning supplies, stressed dead vegetation and otherwise healthy areas, pre-1980s structures with potential lead paint or asbestos, right? A lot of our older buildings, I think we have a few we've been working on in various places where we're abating them and then demolishing them. A lot of them do contain the lead paint or asbestos, so that can be a big one right there. Strong odors of fuel or sweet chemical smells of solvents at some of these sites. If you're walking around and you smell that, could be an indicator of the potential contamination. All right, so this is where we kind of move into starting to gather some of the things you all know. I got to have a phone call with Cassandra a few weeks back, and she shared a few of these potential sites with me. Thank you so much for sharing. Been doing a little bit more research into some of them, trying to learn more. Raise your hand if you've ever seen the ADC Contaminated Sites database. Yeah, hopefully a few folks. Fritz, have you ever been on the Contaminated Sites database before?
I on the what now? What were your slide is?
Yeah, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, the Contaminated Sites
I
database.
have not. No, I have
Oh,
not.
okay. Well, so this is, I think I've talked to a few folks who said we have the best contaminated sites database in the country. I'll just click on it really quick to kind of get us going and looking at a map. Um, Shows the entire state of Alaska, and all of these different icons are active or cleanup complete sites.
We can only see your slides.
Oh,
Nabi
okay.
did just put a link in the chat to the database as well. Thank you, Nabi. There we go. Now we can see it.
We can see it now. I've
Yep.
chugged it onto my correct screen. Well, now you have to look at the side of my face, but that's okay. Um, The green triangles here, or the green diamonds here, those are the active contaminated sites. Yellow indicates cleanup complete, and red stars are cleanup complete with institutional controls, so some sort of regulatory control or engineering control uh, that allows that site to be not fully cleaned up, but still get the designation as long as it maintains those. So here we are kind of looking at Dillingham, zooming out. You can see Aleknagik. There are a good number of sites already in this database. And so this kind of provides us with really the foundation and jumping off point for this brownfield site inventory. Not all of these sites qualify as brownfield sites necessarily. Um, some of them are at like actively used facilities, maybe a like a tank farm or a gas station. I know there's a bunch kind of around the hospital area down here that are contaminated, but again, might not necessarily meet those reuse or abandoned standards associated with the Brownfields program. So there's a lot in here. Specifically ones that I was talking about with Cassandra that could be added or might need more information. The Bingman property that we showed that picture of earlier, that was a big one. Obviously, the solid waste has been removed, but there's likely probably still some contaminant left in that site from all that debris. So that's one that we're going to add to our inventory to investigate more about. She also noted 308 Central Ave, kind of abandoned house structure not too far away. And I believe, Cassandra, you told me that that is now property of the city. It was foreclosed on, I think. Sorry, you're setting you up
Yeah,
here.
I believe that it was gifted to the city is the information that I have gathered over the years.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that. Fritz, I see your hand up over there.
I was just, yeah, I wanted to comment. It seems that boatyards are sort of notorious for, let's say, oil spill, glycol spills, despite the best efforts to keep that stuff contained. Interestingly, I sit on the board of the Bristol Bay Regional Seafood Development Association, which is basically a marketing association for Bristol Bay fish. And we've been approached a couple times by Tev, who's the woman who does the Net Your Problem? Why can't I
Nicole
remember her?
Baker.
Nicole Baker. And she is trying to up her game, looking for funding for her project, which is to get rid of old fishing web, fishing gear.
Oh,
Um, and unfortunately, our board, um, let's say the vote in our board was not to help fund that program at the present time. But one of the things that in a survey of our membership, which is the 1,800 drifters and set netters and 900 set netters in Bristol Bay, there was recognition that providing facilities for getting rid of waste oil, other chemicals ranked higher on on that survey that was done, compared to web. Personally, I think web is another issue really that needs to be dealt with, and Nicole's program is turning that into reusable plastic, stock. So, but but yeah, boatyards generally, despite our best efforts, there are occasional spills and that need to be dealt with at some point.
yeah,
And
definitely. And when it comes to brownfields, I don't know if there's any like kind of part of the coastline in Dillingham or like spots where there were old boatyards that aren't really necessarily utilized anymore. Um, those could potentially be brownfield sites, right? If there's like an active, business or something that's operating in that site, usually doesn't qualify for brownfields necessarily, but definitely could still be something we can look into. Some of them, I know at least when I was looking at the contaminated sites database, there are a few that are already on there from past spills or issues, like the old canneries, I think.
No. Does the site have the website that identifies these places? Does it have specific details regarding, what what the issue was?
Definitely. Yeah, and I can pull back up just quickly to show one more time. If you zoom in and click on any of these, we can see, so maybe we can even go down towards kind of the coast here. So here's one, there's this tank farm. Click on that. Delta Western Tank Farm. You can go look through, get some information, and then there's this site report link that you can click on to view.
Oh,
And it's
gotcha.
got a whole detailed chronology down here of the site's history. So the ADC does a good job of trying to keep this updated. More information about like kind of where the site currently is in that long process. It looks a little bit differently if it's not a brownfields, but kind of the same sort of investigation and then remediation to try and get to a cleanup complete designation. So definitely worth poking around if there's particular places you're interested in. There's a lot of information in here.
No, thank you.
Let's see. Cassandra, is there anybody else in the room? I think Casey was in there, and it was maybe Emma was the other name I heard.
Casey's still here. Emma had to leave.
Okay. Casey, I talked to Cassandra, but I haven't chatted with you at all. Are there any sites that come to the top of your head kind of in your community there?
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Bingman property, and then I also think about like general dump use. How does that play into Brownfield?
As far as like the city's dump or like kind of individual property owners,
The city.
the city dump. So that's kind of outside the scope of the Brownfields program, unless it was like an old or abandoned one. Melissa, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Does that sound?
Right, unless it was like illegal dumping, like a non-permitted one. If it's your current dump that you're having issues with, it goes through the solid waste program. Nabi, is that anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, that's what I would say as well. We have worked on sites that have been illegal dumps in the past, especially it's usually like historical, like kind of what Josh was saying, like we're just throwing like trash over the side of the highway kind of thing. And if there is contamination or the suspected contamination in the area, like if um there was a dump with like old cars that had been leaking, then that might be someplace that we could address, but just as long as it's not a permitted landfill, unfortunately. And I can drop the link for our landfill database. DEC has a landfill database too. So if it's on that database, then unfortunately we can't address it as a brownfields. But if it's not, then we can. So I'll get that to you guys.
I would like to note, too, when talking about Brownsfields, Brownsfield properties are usually places that doesn't have a viable, responsible party to clean up any kind of contamination. If there is a viable, responsible party, liability, there's liability concerns that go back to that responsible party. So, usually because BB&A has a Brownsfield program where I go out and talk to the tribes and develop what our ChemTrack is doing. It's a little harder in bigger communities. Everybody has different priorities, but usually, just to name the sites is good as areas of concern, and then we can go through a prioritization process which ones actually fall into that box. Because not all properties are going to be eligible for brownfields. It's usually, and there's a caveat with it as well in terms of this brownfield process is not just for cleanup, it's cleanup for reuse. So you have to have reuse plans or ideas of trying to get this property back into reuse. But for inventory purposes, and identifying these contaminated sites that are not on DEC's contaminated sites database is a good start to identify which ones can brownfield funding be used for.
Yeah.
Right, it's a whole process.
Yeah, and I think you said it very well, Cassandra, but yeah, in the beginning stages, like we don't necessarily need to see like the plans. We don't need to like there doesn't have to be like a set document that says like X property is going to be a park in 10 years. That usually comes out of just like community conversation and yeah, a little bit later down the line when we actually start getting brownfields funding. But um yeah, brownfields also depending on the contaminant, like for example, petroleum has different, or I would say more strict eligibility requirements, especially like with the property owner. Like it, for example, it's like the two most recent property owners cannot have been responsible parties. And it's for brownfields especially, it's always a little bit of a gray area when it comes to like property ownership and who the responsible party was, especially here in Alaska. Because we see a lot of brownfields that have just been like abandoned for decades, or like maybe the city isn't financially viable to clean it up. So they're like kind of ways to get around it are kind of gray areas that we have worked through for brownfields funding. But yeah, for like the initial effort, just kind of getting everything on the table and just seeing where we can go from there is the goal.
It's a process. And all that money comes with some strings and requirements.
I know there was a couple other sites that Sandra mentioned, and I'm planning to get in contact with Chris from the city and some other people. Like I said, we're going to be there in a couple weeks. If there are any folks that you know of, I think Chris was the name that I had from your all's last meeting to reach out to kind of the stakeholders in the project. But if there are other people you all can think of that would be worth getting in contact with regarding, the past history of your area and potential contaminated sites, that could definitely be useful. I can get those now or later. Is there anybody can think of off the top of their head?
I'm thinking, well, sorry, I was about to digress, but I'll wait.
All right. Is it related to the brownfield properties here?
Oh yeah. I
Okay.
mean, how does one how does one I know the Bingman property has done a lot of things over the years. There have been boats stored there. There's been the solid waste issue that what we were desperate to clean up before Barack Obama came to visit, because it was such an eyesore, and there's also been fish processing take place on that parcel there. How does one get a picture of what all is there, and then what do how does one deal with it? I've seen in the downtown area here a number of years ago, huge white, what I would call salt bags, but I guess it wasn't salt in them. It was, I think it was just soil that was contaminated with something. And how do you figure out the extent of that stuff? And, or that has to be a whole science unto itself, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. So that's one of the things our company does is these like site investigations. In the Brownfields program, that's right, that phase two, the site assessment there. So that can look like a good number of things. You can go out and do surface soil samples. So we'll just go and collect uh, samples from within the kind of top 2 feet to search for those contaminants. We send those soil samples to a lab and they get processed and you can get good quantifiable data. We compare that then to um, kind of the cleanup levels that are dictated by the ADEC and see if any of those analytes are above those levels to get an indication of contamination. When you're talking like bigger, deeper contaminations, we can sometimes do soil borings. So you take in like a small drill rig or something to be able to get down and get samples vertically, kind of delineating how deep the contamination goes. Um, then horizontally, if you do enough of those borings, you can get a sense of just how far out it is too. And with good computers these days, there's all kinds of cool like 3D modeling programs they can do to get a sense of that contaminant plume. You can use the environmental science, geology. I was a geology major, so I'm excited about geology and hydrology. We can even look at like installing groundwater monitoring wells, thinking about where that plume might be moving or heading. Just kind of depends on the scale of the contaminant source and the just local conditions. So our main geologist here, our technical advisor likes to say, site conditions rule all. So really it's kind of dependent on the location. But yeah, it was a good question. Thanks for asking. Did I answer? Did that feel sufficient?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I have a potential site that I just thought of that maybe can go on the list. We
Okay.
have a fire station in town that um, needs to be replaced. I'm pretty sure through city council meetings, there's been discussions about that building, the fire station that is, I think, and don't quote me, but I believe it is, what's the word? Condemned, yes, condemned. The upstairs portion used to be a meeting place where bingo would happen. We called it the bingo hall, and unfortunately, that upper part we can't utilize that. The city still utilizes it as a fire station, but it is definitely not up to par for what um, protecting the community. I think they need a new building and more state of the art technologies to help them address fire concerns. So I think potentially that one could be, if there is reuse plan involved with that, and also the community need, and down the road, if that building were to be demolished, um, going through hazardous building material assessment and stuff like that. So potentially that one could be on there. And I'm just throwing things out as, um, you know,
That's great.
possible sites. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the purpose of the meeting, right? As Navi was saying, kind of casting a broad, wide net, and we can
Mhm.
narrow in and figure out whether it can go on the inventory or not later. But just getting these out there is really helpful. And yeah, I think I don't know, maybe Melissa or Navi could speak better to this, but I think um, if it is pre-1980s, there is a chance of potential hazardous materials. I'd be curious, as it is condemned and underutilized, you could maybe make a case for potential contamination leading to that underutilization, and maybe we could get something there. I don't know. Cool. Thanks for sharing that one. Mhm. All right. Well,
I have a I don't know if this one would work, but there's a spot you can see from the water where people have um, either dumped or pushed cars, trucks, and stuff down the bank to try to stop erosion from occurring.
Hmm.
Um, do you guys know what I'm talking about, Fritz?
Yeah, I think that one's on the map when
Oh,
the
is it?
map
Okay.
pulled up
Okay.
earlier.
It might
Okay.
be. Where? Well, we can check. Let's see. Because that does sound.
And then I was thinking another person that you could talk to is at the tribe. Um, I think they just got a new environmental coordinator, um, who
Basil
might,
Tilden.
yeah, who might not have as much experience, but might be a good resource nonetheless.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
at
If
the
you
very
could,
least, hopefully can help bring her into the fold in these conversations. And, depending on how familiar she is with this, we can, hopefully share some information that would be helpful for her in the future too. So, yeah, that's a great idea.
absolutely. I think also, Josh, and that's a great mention to have, just to expand on that further. There are, with the tribe, we have a tribal council and we have tribal elders that sit on that council that I've presented to in the past. Um, but, long-lived lives here in our community, and if there were potentially tribal council meeting that coincided with your visit, I think that would be a good place to try to gather more information as well.
Definitely. That was, like I was saying, in some of these other meetings I've had, the most helpful people have been the old tribal leaders. I definitely know all the history in those areas. So that's a great shout there. Is there a person you'd recommend getting in touch with or a contact that?
Yeah, actually, Williams,
Hmm,
she is the tribal administrator for the Chahyang tribe.
tribal administrator.
And Chahyang is spelled like Korean, just how you would spell out Korean.
or maybe Kim's dad too.
Yeah, Kim's dad is also on the tribal council. So
Okay, great. That's very helpful.
and Kim would have good knowledge as well.
Okay, yeah, I believe it.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else before we kind of wrap up?
Another person who's been involved in this kind of work is Sue Flensburg, who unfortunately isn't here. You may be familiar with her work already.
Yeah, I think I met her or saw her at the Alaska Forum recently.
Oh. But the cliff of abandoned vehicles tab that you brought up is if one zoomed in really close to the the west side of the Upper Nushagak Bay, I think it's right in that area.
Yeah, whereabouts are we looking?
I wish my well,
Out towards
at
the
the end of Squaw
hospital.
Creek Road.
Is it closer to downtown or further north or
No,
south?
go go west.
West?
Move your cursor west. Whoops, pull it back up again. I think
Right
Yeah.
it's
by
in
the
that neighborhood right
hospital.
there where you were just
The
hovering.
hospital.
Yeah.
Out on that road.
Right
No,
out
There's
here?
a
nope,
hospital.
up
It's further up.
more
Yeah,
north.
it's not by the hospital.
It's out on the road to the hospital, though. Keep going. Keep
Maybe in
going.
that neighborhood? Where's Squaw Creek anyway? I can't see it. Oh,
I know. Right there,
That
Squaw Creek.
that's Squaw
okay,
Creek.
go a little bit south. Whoop,
Yeah, go south.
right in that neighborhood.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
somewhere
right
around
there.
there.
In this area?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
somewhere
it's
around there.
currently not an identified contaminated site. We can do a little research into that area and try and see maybe who the landowners are and go from there. That's a good starting point, though.
That would be a solid waste place, I would think.
So,
And I certainly don't want to
what were
be
you
the one
saying?
to
It was
bring a
called
hammer down on it.
Squaw Creek?
I guess it's called a Mao now.
Right.
They changed the name.
Do
A Mao Creek.
you know how that's spelled?
AMU.
AMAU?
And yeah.
And now?
Website. And it's like a spot where they've put old vehicles to just kind of help as a barrier to coastal erosion. Cool. All right. Well, small group, but I really appreciate all of the insight and help. That was a good starting point for us kind of moving forward. Like I said, I've got a few more phone calls to make, and I can add Kim Williams to that list and maybe reach out to Sue Funsberg as well. Let's see. If you do think of any, you can definitely send me an email. Tough, I kind of last minute just threw your name on there. Is there another? Do you want to be the contact person on your all's end? Who should I be directing things towards out
Yeah,
there?
I don't mind being the contact person. That's fine.
Okay.
Cassandra is the one with all the knowledge, so I'll just be forwarding everything that they send to me to her, but I don't mind being the middleman.
Or I can also, Cassandra, if you want, I can kind of include you in this process. And I feel like certainly, as I remember you mentioned on the phone, but I've experienced too, often having a local contact is definitely easier and encourages folks to share a little bit more than some dude coming from Anchorage. So,
Yeah, absolutely. You can add my name to the reach out list, point of
cool.
contact. Yeah.
All right. Um, Great. Well, I mentioned to Tav that we made a little QR code to a Google form for a brownfield site inventory, like kind of information gathering. I think what we're going to do, I'm going to send him a link to that, kind of put together a little flyer to post around if people want to add information. That's an option there later. But thank you all for coming and joining us, contributing. And Todd for organizing the meeting. Appreciate that. City of Dillingham, Native Village of Aleknagik, Bristol Bay Native Association, and ADEC. Thanks, Navi, for joining us today. Anybody have anything else they want to add before we wrap up?
Thank you for this.
Sorry, Josh, just some feedback. The Google Docs form that I just scanned, the QR code is great, but I think it would be really helpful just to include that definition of what a brownfield is on the Google form.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. I'll do that. And then I think with the flyer, hopefully, maybe Tav, I can put together that for you and send it over pretty quickly, and I can include the definition on there too. But yeah, that's a great idea there, Cassandra. I'll do that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right.
Fritz, did you have something as well?
No, I just wanted to thank you guys for being here. This is really helpful.
Thank you. And excited to come into town in a couple weeks.